My name is Suveer Bajaj. Let me tell you something about myself before we dive into the details uh, of life. So I'm 32 years old. I live in Bombay. Outside of work, I love playing tennis. I love swimming. I love all kinds of music, performing, listening. I dive and ski regularly a few times a year, every day. Essentially, I'm an outdoors guy. I love being in the outdoors as much as I can. So the last 14 months have been very, very painful for me being locked up at home because I try and spend most of my time outdoors and in nature as best as I can. Um, so for those of you who know, I grew up in a city called Bombay, not Mumbai. We're quite specific about that for the people that live here. I grew up in a city called Bombay. And a little bit of a background. I went to a small school in Bombay called the Bombay International School. That's actually how I know Natasha and Shweta as well. I went on to then do my BMS from a college called the HR College of Commerce and Economics, which is a small college in the south of the city where not much happens, to be honest. You've got to find ways of keeping yourself occupied and passing the time and getting the days and getting days to kind of pass by. After finishing my BMS from HR, I then went on to study law from the University of Mumbai. And although I don't really practice, I'm a qualified lawyer. I'm an LLB from the University of Mumbai, which I feel that is a skill set that's come severally handy for me in my life, both personally and professionally. Professionally, of course, it's very helpful to be a lawyer when you run a business or you set up any business. And personally, if you're a lawyer, then you know that people don't really mess with you and argue with you. So these have been skills that have come really handy in life. While I was in school and college, actually, I kept myself very busy doing a variety of other things besides studying. Not like I didn't study. I spent an ample amount of time studying. That wasn't my first priority, um, unlike a lot of other people. But I kept myself amply occupied by doing multiple things to kind of keep, digging into different sides of my personality to help discover who I was. Some of the activities that kept me busy were the most, the one of my most favorites, and something that really helped boost and shot my confidence up was the Model United Nations. Not sure whether any of you guys have had the opportunity to participate in MUN just yet, or whether it's piqued interest for any of you guys, but this was definitely my favorite activity, both in school and college. While I was in school, I got the chance to represent, my school on an international forum at the HMAN, and then in college, I went to go on and set up my College United Model United Nations session, excuse me, which was the HRMUN, which at that point of time was the largest college level Model United Nation session in all of Asia. I actually also represented India in Pakistan at the Lahore University of Management Sciences Model United Nations session. And I was one of a handful of very, very fortunate kids that had the opportunity to actually cross the border and go to Pakistan, which was a very, very rewarding experience for me. And I'm going to talk about that later towards the end of my presentation. But what a lot of what you see on the screen here, whether it was MUN or debates or sports or music did, is on one hand, of course, it gave me the opportunity to kind of explore different facets of my own personality, and at the same time also interact with a variety of different kids from different backgrounds of life and different walks of life. From a sports perspective, I actually went on to do my black belt in karate, and I went on to actually fight in the nationals in the year 2002, which was a very, very rewarding experience, because I feel that when you start, when you start investing in sports, you end up meeting people from all parts of the country, from very different walks of life, as opposed to the small bubbles that we're so comfortable that we grow up in, in school or in college. And I feel that doing a lot of this from a very young age gave me a lot of perspective in terms of what life was outside the bubble that we lived in, in school or in college. So I think in addition to that, what it also did for me is it also kind of showed me different facets of my personality that I didn't know existed. Of course, the college experience by itself is not restricted only to academics, though a lot of our parents, teachers, etc., focus a lot of that time and energy to ensure that we have great academic results. But I think for me, my biggest achievements came from the fact that I managed to learn about myself in college. When I was in college, the second logo that you're seeing over here, which is the HR College logo, I started the HR Model United Nations, which at the time was the biggest MUN in Asia. And we had people come down from, I think, 13 countries at the time, which back in 2006 was quite a big deal for an MUN in Bombay and in India at the time. This is all of 15 years ago. And it really gave me the opportunity to try my hand in leadership roles. I was the Secretary General at the time, and really gave me the opportunity to try my hand at a leadership role when it came to manifesting things and managing teams and managing people. I was in the first year of college, and I had people 2 years my senior and 2 years my junior work in my team. And it gave me my first real stint at non-commercial entrepreneurship or intra-college entrepreneurship in that context. And I think it did a lot of cementing for me in terms of personal goal setting. And that's where I think the idea for me to to dive into this world of entrepreneurship really came from. Later in 2008, I was at the helm of making a decision after I finished my second year of college as to whether I wanted to do an internship, and I'd done a bunch of internships from 2014 to 2017. From 2004 to 2007. Across the board, ranging from banking and financial institutions to journalism to media. And I did find the internship experience very rewarding. So in the summer of 2008, after I finished my second year of college, I decided to blindly jump into, or accidentally jump into entrepreneurship. And I accidentally founded this company called FoxyMoron with 4 of my college friends that I spent a lot of my time growing up with. Now, it's interesting to, I'm going to spend a second here to talk about this part of my journey, because it's interesting to realize that I was 18 years of age. As you see, I look nothing like that guy who's sitting on the right of your screens at the moment. I was 18 years of age and had no context to life whatsoever, but was greedy and hungry and ambitious and had a lot of time and energy and clearly a lot of hair on my head as well, as you can see. But jumped right in, right? And in fact, what was comforting was knowing that I had my comfort zone around me. I had friends around me that I'd grown up with, that I could trust, and that I felt that I really knew. Little did I know that I was building these fancies and these castles, these fancies in my head and these castles in my sky, in the sky. And years later, they would get destroyed. So I think, I'm going to take a pause here to kind of, draw emphasis and light to the fact that the versions of reality that we know for ourselves keep changing at every point of time in your life. When you're in your teenage years, you believe that your world is, comprises of and is surrounded by the people that you share your day and your bread with, your bread and your wine with, so as to speak. But sharing relationships, both personally and professionally, putting them into the same bucket was a whole new experience for me altogether. And to cut a long story short, was actually a very bad experience. And I'll go on to tell you why later as well. FoxyMoron as an agency, now let me tell you a little bit about the business. FoxyMoron as an agency, we started out in 2018, sits at the intersection of content, media, data, and technology. Inherently, it's a digital marketing agency that serves digital marketing solutions to customers across the board. We manage clients ranging from a Hindustan Unilever to a Procter & Gamble, to a L'Oreal, to a Castrol, to a Dabur, to a Mami, to a Netflix, to an Amazon, to a L'Oreal, essentially customers across the board that have young audiences, young consumer audiences on the internet. And what we do is we use our prowess with digital content, media, technology, and data to help service or serve digital marketing or media solutions to help these customers meet their needs. I'm sure you guys are familiar with how e-commerce has become the new normal, especially over the course of the last 1 year when retail has kind of died a natural death. I'm sure all of you guys spend hours streaming content on platforms like Netflix and Amazon Prime and Voot and Sony Live. Some of you may even be listening to music on streaming platforms such as Apple Music or Spotify or a variety of other such streaming services. So clearly, it's no surprise or no joke for us that digital by itself has become, the lead medium as far as our and your generation is concerned. Now, of course, with your generation, you guys grew up with cell phones in your hand. We didn't necessarily have that from a timing perspective. We still grew up and we were still made to read the newspaper at 7:30 in the morning before we went to school. We still came back from school, finished our homework, went downstairs to play, and then came back and watched television. The concept of growing up in the digital era wasn't native for us as it is for you. I think our generation has been quite transformational to kind of adapt the transformation of media when it comes to offline or mainstream media versus digital. And I think that pivotally led to a couple of competitive advantages for guys like us that entered this in 2008. And I want to take a second to talk about this. Digital marketing is a very promising industry in India. And while the industry is promising, a lot of guys who've been doing advertising and media for generations tried their hand at doing digital in the late 2000s and early 2010s and failed, despite the fact that they had a lot of backing and funding, and despite the fact that they had heritage and robust networks in India. They failed purely because they didn't necessarily have product knowledge. With guys like us, with entrepreneurs like us, who started with absolutely no baggage, because we didn't come with any television experience or any print experience, and we dove head first with absolutely no business baggage or entrepreneurial baggage, I feel it gave us a competitive advantage over a variety of other large mainstream competitors who tried to do what they did but failed miserably. Now, our business has reached a point today where we're nearly 400 people across 3 locations in Bombay, Delhi, and Bangalore. And we've got 5 offices across these 4 locations that service our clients across content, media, and data, content, media, technology, and data services. What we're kind of evolving the business into, a few quick milestones before I talk about the evolution of how the business kind of moves forward. But a few milestones for us is we started the business in 2008. In 2012, we opened our first office in New Delhi. In 2015, we opened our second office in Bangalore. And from then on, what we've done is we've started our growth strategy inorganically by acquiring agencies with certain key skill sets across the board. And let me tell you what that looks like. So the agency that was called FoxyMoron today now has a holding company or a parent company called Zoo Media over it. Zoo Media is a holding company or a parent company that we've started ourselves so that we're able to set up a network structure. Now, typically, a network structure essentially means a conglomerate of organizations, businesses, or our line of work agencies that may have specialized skill sets and specialized services that complement one another to help service their clients in a unified fashion. Kind of like if you went to school and the same school gave you the option to study, pursue sports, pursue extracurricular activities, pursue arts, fine arts, performing arts, whatever it may be. And you have different departments inside the same school that help you work on your overall personal development. Similarly, we have different agencies inside a network structure that contribute different facets to our clients' developments. Now, why this became important to us is because we realized that one agency servicing 85 clients only has that much growth trajectory. We can keep adding more clients, but if we don't add more products and services, it kind of becomes a very unidimensional approach to how we service business. So over a period of time, we started building and acquiring new agencies and more agencies that help add more value to our clients. And let me spend a minute telling you what these agencies are. I spoke to you briefly about FoxyMoron, which of course is the lead agency that's been around for the last 13 years. And FoxyMoron services clients in the space of creative content and media, where we service digital media solutions by acquiring customers for our brands online. We build out content strategies and deploy them on social media. We build advertisements and deploy them on YouTube, on television for our advertisers. We have a small advisory company called Doinoik Consultant that works with startups, that helps startups write their business plan and their platform strategy in terms of understanding and evangelizing digital. We have a small talent management company called Poland that books and manages digital talent across the board. We manage some large-scale talent as well. If you guys are familiar with the cricketing industry, we manage large talent like Sunil Gavaskar and Ravi Shastri and a bunch of other prominent cricketers inside our talent wing. Our fourth agency, called The Rabbit Hole, is our content production agency that builds content solutions for advertisers. Our largest client is Netflix, which is a platform which I'm sure all of you must be familiar with. And if anyone looks at Netflix's content on Instagram or YouTube, all that content has been created by us for the purpose of popularizing the shows on Netflix. We've got a couple of technology companies called Noesis Tech and Phosphine that do some really cool stuff, right from building apps to games to e-commerce. We build crazy AR and VR solutions. I'm sure you guys are familiar with augmented reality and virtual reality and mixed reality. We do some cool stuff with image recognition, with voice-based search. We're now segueing very heavily into NFTs. If you guys are following with the NFT craze that's built on the blockchain technology that follows the same fundamentals of cryptocurrency, and doing some really cool forward-facing work in context to being relevant and being knowledge leaders in this digital space. I want to spend a second walking you through some of our clients so you get a chance to understand the depth and the breadth of work that we do in context to the clients that we service. A lot of these are brands that you guys must be familiar with. A lot of these are brands I'm sure you must be interacting with on a day-to-day basis and actually even using. The first couple being Netflix, Amazon, L'Oreal, Burger King, Hershey's, Colgate. I'm sure all of these are brands that you interact with and use on a daily basis. There's one brand in the center that I intentionally put there called Ather Energy, which is a Bangalore-based brand. Not sure whether you guys are two-wheeler companies based out of Bangalore that we helped launch about 4 or 5 years ago. But the rest of these brands, I'm sure you're familiar with a variety of these brands and their propositions across sectors, like I said, that cater to young audiences such as yourselves on the internet. What's been interesting for us, though, is if you look at this, this body of work, we'll notice that a large portion of this has a collection of multinational corporations, as well as relative startups. You see a logo on the bottom left with a monkey, and this is a popular beer brand in India called Bira, which is a relative startup in India. You see a logo on the top left, which is Swiggy, again, a Bangalore-based startup, young company startup. And what's really been advantageous for us is us really using our corporate expertise that we've been able to gain at this young age over the course of our 20s and apply that intelligence to young organizations that we work with. So, of course, this is my day job. And of course, I have a lot of fun running this agency. Like I said, we're about 400 people now between 3 cities. And there's a lot of excitement on the horizon for us as well. In fact, last year, we were to open our first 3 global offices in Dubai, Singapore, and Canada, respectively. Unfortunately, because of the pandemic, we had to pull those plans back, and we're going to have to postpone those to 2022 at the moment. Hopefully, if things are in a slightly better state and life comes back to normal, then we're able to kind of accelerate those in the direction of in 2022. Over the course of this year, we're also diversifying our organization to start producing films. We're in the process of producing 3 films that will now be available on streaming platforms like we spoke about before, Netflix and Prime. And when we started producing films, I actually ran into my second bouquet of companies. My second bouquet of companies goes under the brand name The Vibe. The Vibe is essentially, if I have to break this down, it is the coolest adventure sports company in India, coolest adventure sports content company in India. We do some kick-ass content with kayaking, surfing, scuba, skiing, snowboarding, downhill mountain biking, fly shooting, wingboarding, fly diving, slacklining, you name it. We are the go-to action adventure sports content company in India. In fact, we just dropped our first OTT release on an OTT platform called MX Play. I'm not sure whether you guys have discovered MX Play as a platform just yet, which is a cross-country biking platform with cross-country biking show, with bikers biking across the plains of Arunachal Pradesh. Now, I've had some very, very interesting learnings working on The Vibe. So like I said, The Vibe is a non-fiction content company, which means that we don't get the flexibility to sit and write down scripts like movie producers do, like directors do, like filmmakers do. We create stories out of reality, right? And not reality television like, Big Bosses, where you shove some contestants into a room and play games with them. But reality television in context to what happens in life outside of the 4 walls of of a studio, or outside the 4 walls of what a director connotes to be his workspace. And that's where we have the flexibility of exploring the work with very, very promising individuals who do some promising stuff. And if you notice, all of this funnels back into the first thing that I spoke about, my constant love for being outdoors, being in nature, and really celebrating my individual passions. And I think that this was a very big learning for me in context to me being able to put my passion and my profession together, which I feel is so important, because at times people believe that things that they're passionate about cannot necessarily become work for them, cannot necessarily end up making them money. And here I realized that I was very successfully able to do that, because in my personal life, I spend a lot of time doing everything that you see on this list in front of you, whether it's surfing or scuba or whatever else the case may be. And I was now able to kind of utilize my skill in terms of digital and content and marketing to pick up my hobbies and actually funnel them into my next set of companies. I know we're running short of time, so I'll quickly wrap up here. And the last thing I want to talk to you about is a podcast that I recently started 12 weeks ago. I mentioned to you on one of the previous slides that I had the opportunity of visiting Pakistan in 2006. I was one of only, I think, 15 Indians that year that had the opportunity to go across to Pakistan. And to give you a little bit of personal context as well, my family came from undivided India. All four of my grandparents were born in a state called Sindh, which now rests inside of Pakistan, which was prior to 1947 in undivided India. And during the partition, my family came across the border and settled down in different parts of India, of course, Bombay being one of the most prominent places they settled down, which is why I'm here. When I traveled to Pakistan in 2006, I made a lot of friends with boys and girls across the border and continue to stay in touch. And last year, as most of you know, we were forced to spend a lot of time at home. And when we were spending time at home, we ended up watching a lot of interesting movies and shows and stuff like that. I found that there was one common narrative between all the content that I watched. Right? I like watching a lot of crime, thriller, drama, that kind of stuff. And with every single crime, thriller, drama film that I watched or show that I watched, there was one central theme that there's a bad guy and we've got to go and get him. And in every single movie and every single show, the bad guy turned out to be Pakistani, irrespective of whether the show was based on true events or the show was based on someone's imagination and fiction. In every single show, the bad guy was Pakistani. And that kind of irked me, right? Because Pakistanis are not always the bad guys. So I picked up the phone on this friend of mine, Umair, who lives in Karachi, and I had a conversation with him. I was like, Umair, how do you like it? Like when you watch these movies, Bollywood is huge in Pakistan. I'm sure you guys know that, right? How do you guys like it when you watch these Bollywood movies? And in every single film, the bad guy is a Pakistani. He said, Suveer, we hate it, and the media does that here as well. And I said, Umair, you're a young media professional in Karachi. I'm a young media professional in India. We're pointing fingers at the media by saying they shouldn't do this. But what are we as media professionals doing to really change that narrative? And we end up having a series of conversations last summer, and we just accidentally, on Zoom, pretty much like this, and accidentally hit the record button. And over the course of last year, we sat down and we heard these conversations again and again and again, and realized that there's a lot of hope for the youth to change this narrative that our forefathers have brought down from generations. Of course, it's understandable for them to have baggage when it comes to the partition, but it's not understandable for us too. We've grown up in a world where we believe in being considerate and inclusive and breaking through the shackles of societal despair that have come down generations. And we asked ourselves that if we have to walk the walk, how can we change that narrative, right? And what is our strength? Our strength is that we're media professionals. Can we do this in the form that we understand, which is through media? And I'm not sure whether you guys are familiar with the format of podcasts, but 12 or 13 weeks ago, we launched a podcast called 883 to Infinity. 883 is the number of kilometers it would take me if I got into my car to drive to Karachi. Doesn't sound really far, right? Sounds like I would make it there in a day. But if I actually got into my car to drive to Karachi, I would never get there. It would take me infinity to get there, right? Which is why 883 to Infinity. And every week we'd interview a different guest with the lens of culture, content, community, not with the lens of religion and politics, not with the lens of going tu me and doing an Arnab Goswami, right? Because if we do that, then how are we better than Arnab Goswami? We will get pulled down. We'll get pulled down in Pakistan. We'll get pulled down in India. But with the lens of identifying the similarities, right? I'm sure you guys are reading the tweets nowadays that Pakistan's putting up where they say breathe for India, saying that we're cut from the same soil, we breathe the same air. We should be considerate to the cases going on in India today, right? And we are cut from the same cloth, and that's true. And we are the same set of people. So the objective is to identify the similarities, and I'm sure there'll be differences, but we celebrate those differences through the form of music, food, film, culture, art, and we have a bunch of very interesting guests that come and share these stories with us. Our podcast is trending in over 59 countries today, in countries that I didn't even know existed. Today, we broke into our 59th country called San Marino. We're in countries like Yemen and Senegal and French Polynesia. And we've got a listener base literally around the world, because I guess the message that we're really putting out to the youth is, not messages of peace, because peace is a very politicized word, but, messages of friendship and harmony. So I've done a lot with my time over the last maybe 13 years, so to speak. And sometimes I sit back on a Sunday and ask myself, why do I do so much? Why can't I spend more time with myself, just kicking back with a beer and having a good time in life? And I realized that, I spoke to you guys about 2006 when I started the HR Model United Nations. And I started that, and we started with 5 colleges. We started with the ambition of getting 5 or 6 colleges, and we eventually ended up with the participation of colleges from over 13 countries in the world. And I realized that's only possible when you dream big, right? And that's what we've kept doing. We've kept saying that this is who we are today, but that doesn't stop us from imagining what we can be tomorrow. And I think that's the last point I want to leave you guys with, which is, you guys are at a formidable age in your lives, where you have the good fortune to be exposed to so much by virtue of being part of this very, very connected world. And by virtue of that, it gives you the option, it gives you the choice to it gives you the choice. It gives you the choice. To think about how, in what direction you really want to frame your life. We weren't as aware of our surroundings as you guys are today, right? And you have the good fortune of being aware of your surroundings. You have the good fortune of being connected to people anywhere in the world by virtue of the fact that you have platforms like Clubhouse today that allow you to become the center of a conversation that could be going on anywhere in the world. And it's understandable that you're in a stage in your life where you're nervous or you're scared to put yourself out there because you don't know how the world will react to you. You don't know how your peers will react to you. But what stops you from trying? What stops you from dreaming, right? And I know I'm out of time, so I'm going to stop here. And if we do have time for questions, I'm happy to take a few.
So you were talking about Zoo Media, right? And how you acquired both startups and conglomerates. How would you say that what would you say were the advantages and disadvantages of that? Like, did you see any contrast? Like, how did they?
So 2016 was an interesting year for India in which, there was a lot of, forget the technicalities aside, but over the last 5 or 7 years, the number of startups in India has increased exponentially. India has always been an entrepreneurship-driven company. If you really think about, the generations of large-scale businesses that have succeeded in India, which were family businesses, which were the Tata, Birla, Godrej's, etc. But India has always been a country that's been fueled by entrepreneurship. The last 5 or 7 years has been a goldmine for India because of the amount of money that's come in that's really helped fuel startups. Now, I'll tell you what some of the advantages of working with startups are. Some of the advantages of working with startups for me were that I got the opportunity to work directly with founders. Very often when you work with large multinational corporations, they have very long, very large hierarchies. They have a very large hierarchy in terms of red tape and the number of people that you have to work with. So if I had to eventually get to a decision maker, it might take me 3 or 4 meetings before I had a decision maker in the room. A decision maker being a CEO or a CFO or something like that. So the guy who can sign on the dotted line. When I work with startups, I could meet the founder at the drop of a hat because he's invested in the growth of his company day on day, as opposed to in an MNC that's already grown. They have larger interests and priorities. Now, because they have larger interests and priorities, MNCs also work very slowly. Startups work very quickly. They're lean, they're agile, and they're open to experimentation. So you can pitch out-of-the-box ideas to them, and they're more susceptible for it. The third advantage that I saw working with startups is that the growth curve is much faster. You can get from 0 to 50 in 2 years, but working with MNCs, it would probably take you 10 years to get from 50 to 100 to cover the same delta. To briefly talk about some of the disadvantages, startups in India today are very, very dependent on external funding, which means that if the startup does not perform in terms of revenue, and most startups in India don't perform in terms of revenue for the first 10 years, then they're constantly dependent on their investors who are funding them to get from point A to point B. And as service providers and partners to these startups, we're constantly dependent on their investors as well, which means that if we're invested in working with a startup and their investors don't back them for subsequent rounds, it doesn't ensure continuity of business for us. It doesn't ensure that we get paid on time. And these are very large challenges for small independent businesses like us. We're not backed by investors. We're not backed by global corporations. So if a client defaults on paying me fees, it means that I can't pay 400 people their salaries tomorrow, which hurts people, it hurts business, it hurts the economy. And these are very large risks while working with startups. You don't know if the startup fails tomorrow, the startup shuts down and doesn't pay you crores of rupees worth of dues. How does that impact my business? And these are risks that I need to build into when I measure the pros and cons of working with startups.
I just wanted to ask how you came up with the idea of working with startups. Like, what was in your mind when you started your company?
So to be honest, nothing. I started my company by absolute accident. I started the company in 2008 when I was still in the second year of college. I was only 18 at the time. Second year of college in Bombay, which would typically mean that I would have just finished the just finished school. If you guys do 11th, 12th in school, I don't know what the system is in Bangalore. But effectively, I was 18 when I started the company. And what was in my mind at the time, Rishikesh, was that I didn't want to do another internship. I had interned from the ages of 16 when I finished my 10th grade to 18. I interned at Citibank, I interned at Indian Express, I interned at a bunch of very, very well established and well reputed organizations, both Indian and global. But I didn't enjoy the internship experience, to be brutally honest. I realized that as an intern, the conventional paper pushing, getting Xeroxes and coffees, that's what I was made to do. My learning was actually more outside the office than in the office. And I was very resistant to do yet another internship. At the same time, in 2006, when I had set up the Model United Nations in my college, I was also equipped with the confidence that I'm able to do something on my own, and I don't have to be dependent on other people to give me a platform to do something. And what was in my mind was that while I'd set up the Model United Nations platform, I realized that the most important thing for me, the most important motivation for me is validation of self-worth. Different things motivate people differently. A lot of people are motivated by money. I want to make a lot of money in life. A lot of people are motivated by names and brands. I want to work with the coolest people in life. A lot of people are motivated by glamour. Oh, I want to run a global organization in 25 countries, right? For me, my motivation came from validation of self-worth. Saying, if I set out a task or I put my mind to something, can I do it, right? And if I can, then I'm validating my self-worth. And if I can't, then it's not boosting my confidence. And that was what was in my mind.
Can you give some advice to these kids? Like, say, a bunch of them have a business idea or something that, they're working, interested in a pet project. Can you give them like a, 5 steps of things they can do if they wanted to convert like a business idea into reality? How does a kid their age go about it?
Sure, absolutely. That's a very good question, Natasha. And it's really exciting, to be honest, for us in our 30s to not to be thinking, but to be knowing that the generation below us that's in school today is thinking of business ideas at this young age already. I think it's very motivating. And first of all, for all those of you who have spent some time thinking of different ideas, whether in the format of pet projects or in the format of potential business ideas for the future, congratulations to each and every one of you. The first step that I would encourage any of you is, if you have an idea in your mind, you may discuss it with 100 people, friends, family, parents. The idea is not an idea until you write it down. Write your ideas down. That is the first point of feedback I would give anybody. The reason I tell you this is because the idea becomes real when you write it down. When you write anything down, it becomes real. If my New Year's resolution is to lose 5 kilos, it's not, but hypothetically it was, it becomes real when I write it down. Every single day when I open up my book and I read what I have written down, it becomes more and more real to me. Also, every day I read it, I look at it differently. So I'll keep building on to the idea. But when I write it down, it gives me a backbone, or it gives me a skeleton in terms of the idea coming to life, right? So the first piece of advice is write your idea down. The second piece of advice is, once you've written it down, show it to everybody. Most people think that, oh, if I have a cool idea and I show it to someone or I tell someone, they'll steal that idea. That's bullshit, right? That's absolute bullshit. In my honest belief, when it comes to building companies or building projects or doing anything in life, it doesn't have to be business related. The idea is only 5%. The execution is 95%. And the idea that you have today, I'm sure is unique, but I'm pretty certain that someone in some corner of the world has thought of the exact same thing. Or I'm pretty certain that your idea has been inspired by someone else's idea. So don't live, in a bubble or a fantasy where you believe that, oh, my idea is precious and I will not share it with anyone. Ideas grow on the back of sharing them with people. So show it to everyone. And you'll get a lot of perspective from people saying, hey, look, you looked at A, B, C. Maybe you can look at it slightly differently. And then you go back and you think about it and you're like, dude, that guy was really right. If I look at it differently, then I don't have to go from A to C. I can go from A to D directly. So share these ideas with people, right? The third piece of advice I would give you is, do not be possessive about your ideas. A lot of people, when they share their ideas with friends, family, colleagues, parents, they get very defensive, right? This is my idea. Don't tell me what to do. I thought of this. Who are you to tell me? Oh, I've done 3 months of research or 2 months of research on this idea. What do you know? This is not your field. This is not your line of work. Do not be possessive about your ideas. If you are voluntarily sharing an idea with someone, the only reason they would feedback it or critique it is to help you. So you have to be open to the idea of people's feedback and critique because they're doing it to really help you, as number 3. And number 4 is in whatever capacity possible. Any capacity, whether it's called a prototype or a beta or a working model, whether it costs money, whether it's free, whether it's say costs money, costs a little bit of money, whether it's free, you have an idea, you've written it down, you've shown it to people, execute it, do something about it, right? Today, you kids are 20 steps ahead of where we are today. When I talk to my cousins who are 17 and 18, who are just getting out of high school, and they talk about app ideas, and I tell them, if you have an app idea, spend 30 days, code the app and show it to me. If you don't code the app, I'm not going to look at it. And they sit down at 10 o'clock in the night after they're done with school and college, and they spend 3 hours a night coding apps, and they show them to me, and I destroy those apps. I'm like, this is crap, right? Because that's my feedback process. But if they don't sit down and code the app themselves, I don't look at the idea. Because you can have 100 ideas, but you're not going to know what the reality of that idea is until you do something about it. And you guys have resources today. Y'all come from a very different era that we do when you don't have access to resources, you don't have access to technology, you don't have access to peer groups, you don't have access to labs, to incubators, to entrepreneurship cells in your college, which we never had. Right? And I'm sure that if you go to your institutions or your school or your colleges or your parents or your networks or your YPO kids forums, there would be a variety of different ways in which you could actually evangelize these ideas and make them come to life. Right? So do something about it. And I'm saying do something about it in your personal capacity. If you think of a great product idea, use household home appliances and put the product idea together. Look at what it looks like. You may not have fiberglass at home. You may have old cans at home, but use the old cans and put them together. And the 5th piece of advice that I would give you, and the last piece of advice that I would give you, is that ideas are great, but you should be clear about why you have this idea, right? So ideas are great for 2 reasons. One is ideas are great because they are passion points for you. And 2 is ideas are great because you want to build business out of them. Not every time do these 2 Venn diagrams intersect, right? If you're pursuing an idea, you can be clear that I'm pursuing an idea because I like doing this. It's a hobby of mine. I love playing football. I've got a group of guys together. I'm going to create a football league. This is a passion project for me. I may spend the entire summer playing this football league, putting these guys together. We may have a participation fee, but this is not something I'm doing to make money. I'm passionate about it, and therefore I'm putting this football league together for my friends and their friends and their friends. So be clear about why you're doing something. And similarly, if you say that, hey, look, I genuinely believe that I can make a career in sports, and I'm doing this football league today because I believe I can start managing talent tomorrow, and I can start becoming their representative into the ISL and into bigger tournaments in the future like that, then be clear in terms of what your objective is before you start out, right? So these are the 5 pieces of advice I would give you guys when you're really brainstorming on your idea.
When you start a startup and you have an idea, but like it's only you which is actually working on it, but when you tell other people, they don't seem too keen on the idea, but you need more people to make it grow, right? So I was wondering how you got like more and more people to actually join your startup and help you, with money being not the only like factor for motivation.
You know, behind every entrepreneur story, there's a story, right? For me, when I started in 2008, the story, when I look at it in retrospect, the story was very easy, right? It was a very easy sell because I was 18 at the time and I was starting a company of my own. And at that point of time, and I'm sure, you know, Natasha and Shweta can talk to this point as well. At that point of time, it wasn't as common for 18-year-olds to be starting companies. Now it's a lot more common, and now, you know, a pat to each of you on all your backs that are thinking of doing things very early on in life. But at that point of time, it wasn't very common. In fact, when we were 18, like I said, we were looking for internships that summer, and we decided not to. And all of a sudden, instead of looking for an internship, I told all my college friends, hey, if anyone hasn't gotten an internship, I can give you an internship. And all of a sudden, college kids were like, hey, we're looking for internships, but now there's this kid who sits right behind me in class who's saying that he can give me an internship. That's pretty cool, right? So it was, you know, we managed to build this, the sense of cool very early on in life. We realized that cool currency doesn't last very long, right? Because something's cool today, it's not cool tomorrow, and there'll be 500 things that are cool tomorrow, the day after that. So very early on in life, we asked ourselves, right? I started the business with 3 of my friends, and we asked ourselves, what's really important to us? What do we value, right? And what motivates us? And like I said earlier, money wasn't the motivation for us. We didn't say that we want to become millionaires in our 20s and billionaires in our 30s. That was not the motivation. The motivation for us was to work with good people. So very early on in life, what we did is we defined our value systems, right? And I'm sure you guys are familiar with what value systems are. Things like honesty, integrity, trust, respect, loyalty. And we said that our value systems are going to reflect in the way we work. This may be in the way we work with our clients. We will always be honest in our dealings with the clients. In the way we work with our team, which is our employees, or in the way we work with vendors, partners, people who we outsource work to, platforms, like we work with large platforms in our industry like Google, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, as you can imagine. No matter no matter what direction the industry turns, our work is always going to be committed to being in line with our values. And over a period of time, what ends up happening is, our companies start building up reputations for themselves. How does a company build reputation? Because one person who worked with the company will say, hey, dude, I really had a good experience working with that company because, even though things didn't go 10 on 10, they were great people to work with. They always gave me a very solid response. They always gave me a very honest answer, even though things, didn't go exactly in the line that we desired it to. And over a period of time, what that amounts to is it amounts to you building the culture of your company. So the culture of your company starts with being young and cool and edgy and fun and all that stuff that we started off when we were probably closer to your age at 18. And at 18, everyone knows how to have fun, right? So that was easy. But what was not easy was building the culture in terms of the honesty and the respect and the trust and the integrity. Because when you're going to someone to sign $1 million check to you and they're looking at you and they're like, you're 19. How can I trust you with $1 million? And then you've got to prove yourself by taking a $10,000 check from him and prove to him that you can manage a $10,000 campaign, then a $100,000 campaign, and then $1 million campaign. And then by the age of 20, he's confident that you're able to manage this and he trusts you. And then he tells his friends and colleagues that, look, I work with these kids. They're amazing to work with, right? And that's what building the culture of your company really means. And that's what worked for us really well, that we spend a lot of time, attention, and energy building the culture of our company.